There's no other jurisdiction in Canada, none of the other provinces or territories are asking for this kind of authority. So what is David Eby's goal here? And when you look at what's in the bill, it's actually very, very disturbing. They have the ability in this bill to spend as much as they want. We're already running an $11 billion deficit. They could double it if they want and spend anything they want without needing the authority of the legislature.
What is your suggestion to deal with the tariffs if you are in the power, or what will be your strategy?
It's the equivalent, our barriers we have amongst the provinces, the equivalent to a 23% tariff on British Columbia. Let's open this up. Let's actually treat ourselves like Canadians. Let's think bigger.
There is a group of environmentalists which sometimes BC Conservative is saying that they are getting funds from the US government, and how they are helping NDP and doing all that.
They have much better outcomes than we do. They have a lower cost and much better outcomes. We are one of the most expensive, the second most expensive in the world, and we have some of the worst outcomes in terms of wait times and all these, and access to care.
Why this government is not utilizing the resources, and why they are not fixing this issue? ਚੈਨਲ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਫਰੰਟਲਾਈਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ। ਦੋਸਤੋ, ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਰਾਜਨੀਤੀ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਬੰਧਿਤ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੀਡਰ ਆਫ ਆਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਜੌਨ ਰਸਟਰਡ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਉਣ, ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨ। ਸੋ ਲੈਟਸ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਆਵਰ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਗੈਸਟ ਇਨ ਦਾ ਸ਼ੋਅ। Welcome to the show, John Rustad, and we're great to have you in the show.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be able to be here.
So let's start with the BC government. They are trying to give more powers to themselves so that they can deal with the tariff conflict and all the things. You agree, or what is your opinion on this?
There's no question that we need to address what Donald Trump and the Americans are doing south of the border. We need to be able to be strong. We need to be able to make sure that we fight for the people in British Columbia. However, when you look at what the provincial government is asking for, they're asking for unlimited authority, unlimited powers with no oversight and no need to go to the legislature. There's no other jurisdiction in Canada, none of the other provinces or territories are asking for this kind of authority. So what is David Eby's goal here? And when you look at what's in the bill, it's actually very, very disturbing.
Then why they want these powers if federal government is dealing with the thing?
I think it's really to do with what David Eby's goal is. He is an authoritarian. He wants to be a dictator. He wants to be able to just do what he would like to do. So, for example, in this bill, there is an opportunity for them to gather and use all your private information in any way that they want to. They have it also in there that if they break any of the existing laws, they're indemnified. They are protected from any sort of legal action against what they're doing. They have the ability to bring in tolls or road pricing as part of this bill, which is something I think they want to do to deal with TransLink. They have the ability in this bill to spend as much as they want. We're already running an $11 billion deficit. They could double it if they want and spend anything they want without needing the authority of the legislature. They have the ability to change any sort of piece of legislation that they would like within this, and to bring in and do anything they would like. It's what's known as a Henry VIII clause, which gives them unlimited authority and power to do anything they want without any oversight, without any need for the democratic processes that we have in British Columbia.
And do you think this has something to do with the tariffs and all these things?
Well, it's the tariff is using an excuse, because it's not even, in this bill it says this is designed for the response to what is coming from the United States, or anything that may be considered or perceived to be happening. So they could preemptively do a whole bunch of things. And I'll just give you an example, and this is probably a wild example, but it is the type of authority they could be asking for. So they've got legislation now that says if you have a vacant property, you're not leasing out a place, you'll be charged a tax on it for not having it out there. Well, they could, in theory, they could say if you have a vacant room in your house and you're not renting it out, you could be taxed for that. This is the kind of authority they're giving themselves to do. And I'm not saying they're going to be doing that, but it's just an example of the far-reaching powers that they could do anything they want now in this province for 2 years without having to do any checks or balances in the democratic processes that we have.
What is your suggestion to deal with the tariffs if you are in the power, or what will be your strategy?
Well, it's certainly not to take the communist approach that we're seeing from them. I believe strongly in democracy. When you need to bring in changes or responses, you take it through the House, you go through the democratic process, you put those things in place. But most importantly, think about how vulnerable we are as Canadians and as British Columbians. Half the food that we consume comes from the United States. All of the jet fuel we need for YVR comes from the United States. 60% of the refined products that we use, that's or gasoline and diesel, comes from outside our borders, most of that from the United States. 20%, actually close to 30% of the electricity we consumed, both last year and the year before, came from the Americans. Like, we are incredibly vulnerable. We need to be doing everything we can to strengthen British Columbia, to look after ourselves, to be in a position of power as you deal with the Americans in negotiations. That means we need to be able to get our goods to market. We have to expand our economy. And then we want to be able to go to the Americans and say, yeah, we want to deal fairly with you, but if you're not going to deal fair with us, we've got other things, other places that we can do this. Trade across Canada is a big factor. It's the equivalent, our barriers we have amongst the provinces, the equivalent to a 23% tariff on British Columbia. Let's open this up. Let's actually treat ourselves like Canadians. Let's think bigger than our own jurisdictions and create that potential, that opportunity and hope that is British Columbia.
So BC already, they have 10.9 billion or something deficit in the budget. So how will you see BC if they are going with their plans?
Well, what we're seeing right now with $11 billion deficit and no real changes, no opportunity to be able to expand our economic potential, our GDP in this province, what I'm seeing from this is anytime they want to do something, they're just going to add on to that debt. So for example, they're talking now about removing the consumer carbon tax. We want to get rid of the entire thing. It's a job killer. But what they're going to do is they're going to increase the carbon tax on businesses and then remove the carbon tax on consumers. Well, you know what will happen. They'll just pass it on to consumers. So they're going to take the carbon tax and actually hide it. But a part of that, of course, will create a hole in their budget that they have not budgeted for. And so this is the types of thing that they'll just sweep under the carpet and do under this new bill so that they don't have to face the scrutiny or more importantly, they don't have to inform the public about this when they're actually doing it.
Do you think they have the good policy for interprovincial relationships, like if they have they are dealing with the other provinces?
I actually don't think that's in place. And so we actually move forward as the Conservative Party, we move forward a piece of legislation which is based on what Nova Scotia did. And what Nova Scotia did is they said, we're going to create a reciprocal agreement for trade and mobility of labor. If you bring down your barriers, they'll bring down their barriers. So we introduced a piece of legislation which was the same, saying this is nice and simple, it's straightforward. We're going to be opening up British Columbia to any other province. You open up your province, we'll open up our province, we'll get rid of these barriers. But what the NDP are doing in this act is they're saying they're going to pick and choose which items they want to deal with and don't want to deal with. In other words, they're still dealing with protectionism, they're still dealing with tariffs within our borders in British Columbia, as opposed to just saying, I want to think like Canadians, I want to make sure that we can strengthen not just British Columbia, but all of Canada.
So the carbon tax is increasing day by day, and there is a group of environmentalists which sometimes BC Conservative is saying that they are getting funds from the US government, and how they are helping NDP and doing all that.
So over the years, there has been hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, that have flowed from the United States, from various foundations and environmental groups in the United States into these environmental groups in British Columbia with one goal, and that is to stop our resource development and stop our ability to get these resources outside of North America. In other words, to weaken our economy and to make us more reliant on the United States. And these same organizations have funded and campaigned for the NDP for decades. This is what is happening with this. And now we are in this vulnerable situation with what's going on south of the border, taking advantage of the fact that we have a government that has done everything it can to stymie and stop our economic activity in this province. Whether that is doing everything they can to stop Trans Mountain Pipeline, or whether that's fighting against LNG, whether that's fighting against our own forest industry. We've been without a softwood lumber agreement for 8 years under the NDP. Our forest industry is in horrible decline. One of the things that we proposed is the Americans are shipping thermal coal through the Port of Vancouver. Let's put a carbon tax on it, but use that money in a trust as leverage to try to get a deal with the Americans so that we can solve softwood lumber. These are the types of approaches we need to do to work with the Americans, because if we do not have any leverage, we have no ability to be able to get deals done with the Americans.
Is there any way so that this funding can be stopped?
For Bill 7, with what they're trying to do with that, the only thing that we can do, of course, they've got the majority vote in the legislature. We're going to be working hard within the tools that we have in the legislature to delay and try to prevent this from coming forward. We are building public support. We have a petition that is that's being signed by people across the province. We encourage people to go to conservativebc.com, sign the petition. We want to make sure that we put as much pressure as we can on the government to say, taking away our democracy and this overreach of power, this authoritarian approach is wrong. That is not who we are. You would expect to see this from a communist country, not from a democratic province of British Columbia.
So these environmentalist group, they are saying we are saving the environment because environment is the biggest issue in the world these days. So what is your opinion on these environment issues? They are saying we are saving the environment, but the other parties, they are trying to...
So tell me this, how is it these organizations are funding environmental groups in British Columbia to fight against the opportunity for us to export LNG? We were the first in North America to pursue and to go after LNG. Now the Americans have 16 plants up and running. And they started after we did. And not a peep out of any of them about what they're doing in the States. So why is it they're shutting down us and having the Americans go after it? You can see the political game that is being played here. We have tens of trillions of dollars worth of natural gas. We could be creating an energy superpower in British Columbia. We could have the highest quality of life, the highest standards of healthcare anywhere in the world, right here in British Columbia, if we took advantage of these resources. And these organizations have been fighting us, delaying us, stopping us from being able to utilize this and realize our full potential to improve the lives of British Columbians. Everybody in this province came from somewhere else. Everybody came here for that promise of building a future. We need to take that full advantage, and we need to be able to fulfill that promise. And that means, quite frankly, we need different government, both in British Columbia as well as in Ottawa, and we need to stop these organizations from blocking our ability to realize our full potential.
A lot of things are happening, and there are 3 MLAs in your party. They are saying we'll try to build a new party. And do you think more MLAs from your party will join them, or is there anything in the NDP that can trigger early election?
So I don't think there's anybody else that is going to go over and join them. And as a party, as an organization, we are very focused on taking down the NDP. Those 3 have a different goal in mind, which is unfortunate. But when you're in that situation where they actually were planning this for weeks before they left, they actually met with the clerk, they were planning on starting a new party, and they were looking for an excuse and a reason to be able to leave. And they found it. And it's unfortunate that this has happened. But the reality is this, in British Columbia as the Conservative Party, we need to be focused on one thing, which is improving the lives of people in British Columbia, fighting for the average everyday person. That is what we've been focused on. We've always said it's not about being conservative or liberal or NDP or Green. It's just standing for what's right. And so that is what we're going to continue to do as we focus this fight on the NDP to try to make sure that British Columbians would be better off in this province under a Conservative government.
So healthcare is a big issue in the British Columbia. Sometimes doctors, nurses, patients, everybody, they are saying there is a big problem in the system. So Conservative favors for the privatization of the system of the 2-tier, or do you think is there any solution within the system?
Yeah, so that's been allied by the NDP in terms of what we're planning to do. What we wanted to do and what we still want to do is we're looking at the European models of healthcare, which is universal healthcare just like we have today. So it's a single payer, the government pays, you get your service, but it can be delivered by both government and non-government agencies. And the reason for that is you need competition, you need the ability to better utilize the health professionals we have. The key here is every jurisdiction that does that, which is like the Scandinavian countries, European countries, even Australia, they have much better outcomes than we do. They have a lower cost and much better outcomes. We are one of the most expensive, the second most expensive in the world, and we have some of the worst outcomes in terms of wait times and all these and access to care. Why would we want to do more of something that's not working? There's no other jurisdiction in the world that follows what we do. Why would we be trying to do more of this? You're looking at Surrey, for example. It takes 18 hours wait time in surgery. In the emergency room in Surrey. We don't have a children's hospital in Surrey. We don't have the capacity that we need in terms of healthcare. We don't have the professionals. We have all these delays and problems in place. It's time to start saying, what we're doing is not working. Let's try to do things better. I'll give you an example. In Canada, we have 10 times, 11 times as many administrators as they do in Germany, even though Germany has twice the population of Canada. Why do we need all this administration? It just bogs things down. It's costs. It is not needed.
So you mean there is a need to reducing government?
There's a need to deal with all this administrative burdens. And I'll give you an example from Alberta. And Alberta is in better shape than we are. There's 1,200 doctors in Alberta. Alberta needs to have privileges like BC does. Doctors need privileges to work in a hospital. There's 1,075 people in Alberta giving those privileges to 1,200 doctors. There's almost as many administrators as there is doctors just to give them privileges to work in a hospital. This is ridiculous. Why would that be needed? This is just layers of administration that aren't needed, that create problems in our healthcare, take away the ability for doctors to be able to actually service patients, and just add tremendous costs. This is the kind of reform that we need so we can make sure all those dollars that we have in our healthcare system are focused on providing services.
So what is your solution for this healthcare system? Will you send patient to outside the BC for the treatment or privatization? Or?
Well, it's, like I say, when you look at the European models that we're looking at, and the services can be delivered by both government and non-government agencies. I'll give you an example. So a surgeon who's recently retired out of Vancouver General, he was a top vascular surgeon. He got 8 hours of surgery time a week. That's all he was allowed to do. He could very easily be doing 30 or 40 hours of surgery time, but the system would only give him 8 hours a week. And he would go in to start his shift for 8 o'clock in the morning. Often there would be delays, sometimes as 8:30, even as late as 9:30 before they started. And he'd be working through a surgery list, and at 1:30 in the afternoon, an administrator would come by and say, you're going to be done by 4 o'clock, right? If you're not done by 4, there will be penalties. You'll lose your privileges. And so he would have to then finish up the surgery he was doing, look at the next one and say, if there's any complications, could I get this done by 4? And if the answer was no, that was the end of his day. That is not healthcare. You need to be fully utilizing these individuals to the best of their ability to be able to provide these services. The system we have is broken. We have great professionals, but the system we have is broken, and we need to reimagine how to do healthcare. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Let's use the models that they're doing in Europe, which are universal healthcare and far better than what we do here in British Columbia.
So why this government is not utilizing their resources, and why they are not fixing this?
I think David Eby put it well when he said if it was easy, we would have done it. There is no easy answers. There are tough questions and tough answers that need to be dealt with, and it takes a government with strength and vision to be able to deliver on that. We aren't getting that from David Eby and the NDP.
Thank you very much, John, for coming to the show. And
thank you very much for having me on. I very much look forward to another opportunity. There's so much that we could be covering off.
Thank you for sparing your time. ਸੋ ਦੋਸਤੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਜੌਨ ਰਸ਼ਰਡ ਹੋਣਾ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ, ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਫਿਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ।